Dawn is just beginning to break over the Miami Amtrak station, Amtrak's southernmost terminus in the country, and many a tri-rail commuter train makes an appearance as the day begins. Today, I got up bright and early to document a very special event. Today, the American Association of Private Rail Car Owners, or the AAPRCO, would be running a special train of private cars known as the Sugarland Limited. This was a rare mileage excursion taking place over 4 days that would first be pulled from Miami to Sebring, Florida by standard Amtrak General Electric P42 DC Genesis power. And then from Sebring, the train would be pulled down the majority of South Central Florida Express's trackage by none other than U.S. Sugar's restored steam locomotive number 148. This was also the first time that the AAPRCO has hosted an event in the state of Florida since 1999, when their train traveled to Tampa, Florida. The train, running under the symbol P968, was set to depart Miami at 8 a.m., so this meant I had to get up early and leave the house no later than 6:30. After I got a few shots of the train sitting at the station, I headed over to Northwest 135th Street in Locka to get a run-by shot, and the train passed 10 minutes after 8 a.m. After the train passed, I headed over to Clewiston hoping to catch the 148 departing the North End shops. But since the 148 had already left, I headed up to Sebring and managed to catch this northbound U.S. sugarcane job near Venus, Florida. I followed the cane job up to Childs, Florida, just south of Lake Placid, and I couldn't help but notice the front loader taking the place of a locomotive as it pulled a cut of sugarcane cars for loading. After this brief stop, I continued on to Sebring, where I came across the star of the show, simmering on the elevated track beside South Highlands Avenue. U.S. Sugar number 148, a 1920 Alco-built 462 Pacific-type steam locomotive, awaits the arrival of its train of private cars as of 11:40 a.m. The 148 brought with it the Miami Locks, a former Amtrak baggage car converted to an open-air car. The locomotive was positioned about a mile south of the spur track that connects the South Central Florida Express line to the CSX Auburndale subdivision. The Sebring Amtrak station was built in 1924 for the Seaboard Airline Railway and is currently served by Amtrak's Silver Star and Silver Meteor, although the Silver Meteor had recently been suspended until September 2022 due to crew and equipment shortages. Rail fans were lined up on the platform anxiously awaiting train P968 from Miami. Right at 12 noon, Amtrak train P968 with engineer Kyle made its triumphant arrival into Sebring, Florida. An extra Am fleet car was positioned behind the engines, as this extra braking capacity would allow the engines to run at a track speed of 79 miles per hour on their way back to Miami after uncoupling from the train. Once the train stopped, I headed over to the spur track on the South Central Florida Express line, where the train would back up to be coupled to the steam locomotive. The sky was a bit cloudy for my liking, but at least it wasn't pouring. At this spot, I met up with several fellow rail fans who had all programmed their radio scanners to listen to the crew talk between P968 and the 148.
As soon as the locomotives go back, that's when I'm going to
At around 12:45, P968 proceeded with caution in reverse down the spur track at a restricted speed of 15 miles per hour. The move was delayed slightly due to issues with the air brake hoses between the cars. After the train cleared the first crossing, I headed over to Kenilworth Boulevard where I waited patiently for the 148 to start backing up to its train. With a blast of its whistle, the 148 began reversing toward its train at around 1:20 p.m. The 148 would not be allowed to touch the CSX Auburndale subdivision as it is not equipped with positive train control, a system now required on major Class 1 railroads. Another reason being CSX's strict no steam policy. Factors such as these are the reason mainline steam excursions in this day and age are such rare events. The crew of the 148 kept in touch with Amtrak P968 as they prepared to couple to the train. The 148 met up with P968 near Sebring's water tower. Sebring is a town in Highlands County, Florida. Surrounding Lake Jackson, it is known as the City on the Circle. Rail fans from far and wide took to the parking lot near the Highlands County Fairgrounds to watch the big event unfold. With 3 blasts of its whistle, the 148 was ready to back up and couple to the cars. With the cars hooked and the air hoses connected, the Amtrak power would cut off at the other end, and the 148's crew made some last-minute preparations before their grand departure. The departure was scheduled to take place at 12:45 p.m., but air hose issues caused the train to run an hour behind schedule. Great fanfare, AAPRCO's Sugarland Limited kicked off its grand trek to Clewiston at 1:50 p.m. Let's now follow the Sugarland Limited on the first leg of its journey from Sebring, Florida to Lake Placid, Florida. After filming at the location at Desoto City Road, I continued on and set up my camera to catch the train crossing the bridge over US 27, welcoming drivers to Lake Placid, Florida. Barely enough time to spare, I was able to catch the Sugarland Limited arriving at the Lake Placid Historical Society Depot, hosting a welcoming ceremony for the train and its passengers and crew. There was a good turnout of excited onlookers at this location. Sugarland Limited arrived at Lake Placid's former Atlantic Coastline Depot built in 1927 at around 2:40 p.m. The train would stay here for around 2 hours, and the 148's crew would take this opportunity to service the engine and take on water. Meanwhile, the passengers would disembark the train to have lunch at the depot. During this time, I seized the opportunity to grab my own lunch. This stop was also a good opportunity to grab some shots of each individual private car. The Miami Locks Sugar Express's open-air car was brought along for the trip so passengers could enjoy the sights and sounds of the 148. The Caritas car is owned by the Friends of the Milwaukee Road 261 organization and was originally built as a sleeper car for the Frisco Railroad in 1948. The Frisco Railroad's Cimarron River is a 1948 Pullman-built sleeper car and was sold to CN and Via Rail before being sold to its current owner in 1983. The Northern Sky Charter's Northern Sky Dome car was originally built for the Union Pacific Railroad in 1955, and their Pullman-built sleeper was also built the same year for the same railroad. Both cars saw use on the original auto train in the 70s. Our next car is the Seaboard Airline Railroad's Hollywood Beach, a 1956 Pullman-built double-bedroom lounge used on the Silver Meteor. The Pennsylvania Railroad's Francis L. Sutter is a 1914 Pullman-built heavyweight business car. Being one of the oldest operable private cars in the country, it was rebuilt in 1957 before going into private ownership in 1971. The New York Central Railroad 3, the Portland, is a 1928 Pullman-built 6-axle heavyweight passenger car built for Harold Vanderbilt, director of the New York Central. The car would later go on to Penn Central and Conrail before being sold into private hands. Last but not least, we have the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad's Chapel Hill, a 1922 American car and foundry built 6-axle observation car. Initially, it was named the Hussar and used for E.F. Hutton and his then-wife Marjorie Meriwether Post before being sold to the C&O in 1937 and later Dewitt Chapel in 1971. The car bears a special plaque for the Sugarland Limited. While the 148's crew performed routine maintenance on the locomotive, I took a quick look at the old Lake Placid ACL depot bearing an old semaphore. The inside of the Lake Placid Historical Society building contained historical railroad artifacts, photos, and even some classic Lionel trains.
They served the catered lunch to the they were on a tour.
The outside of the depot contained an old steam-powered tractor and an old caboose painted in Atlantic coastline colors. Lake Placid is a town in Highlands County, Florida, and is also known as the town of Muros. After the passengers finished their lunch, the Sugarland Limited was preparing to depart. The departure was scheduled for 3:45 p.m., but was pushed back nearly an hour due to the air brake issues at Sebring. In the last 15 minutes, the 148's crew made last-minute preparations and adjustments before departing. At around 4:40 p.m., the Sugarland Limited departed Lake Placid for its second leg of the day's journey to Clewiston, Florida. We will now follow the Sugarland Limited from Lake Placid, Florida to Clewiston, Florida. At Bear Point Lane on the outskirts of Lake Placid, the Sugarland Limited stopped to allow a U.S. sugarcane job to reverse into a siding at Childs, Florida.
Alright, good.
Yeah, you can see it. There's a U.S. sugar train.
Oh, you can see it?
Yeah, I think there's a siding between here and there.
Yeah, there's got to be a siding. I think there is, because there's loading over there, too.
Yeah.
Five minutes after 5 p.m., the Sugarland Limited was back on the move. By 6:15 p.m., the Sugarland Limited stopped for the Caloosahatchee River Swing Bridge in Moorhaven and had to proceed with caution as there was a loaded cane job ahead. For this reason, the Sugarland Limited would stop several times before arriving at Clewiston. At the County Road 720 crossing near Clewiston, we see an eastbound loaded cane job led by the same locomotive we saw earlier, USSC number 311, an EMD GP11 locomotive. Its new cast P5 horn sounded just a bit better than it did earlier. As the sun was just beginning to set, the Sugarland Limited was on the move once again for the last few miles of the journey to Clewiston. last light from the day's sun reflected off of the Sugarland Limited as it made its triumphant arrival at Clewiston, Florida just before 7:30 p.m. Once the train arrived in Clewiston, USSC number 409, a GP38-2 locomotive, shunted the cars into a siding after the 148 cut off. The passengers would stay here overnight until the next day when the train would head to Port Mayaca and Marcy. After getting one last shot of the 148, I headed home, fueled up my car, and headed right back to Clewiston the next morning. It's Sunday morning on April 24th, the second day of AAPRCO's Sugarland Limited excursion with US Sugar number 148, and the action at the US Sugar Railroad's North End shops is just beginning to pick up. USSC number 409 was fired up and ready to shunt the coaches for the Sugarland Limited into position. The passengers and crew were just getting up to prepare for the day's events, but the train's departure, scheduled for 8 a.m., was pushed back to allow US Sugar cane jobs to start their day and make some money. While the USSC 409 moved the coaches out of the siding, US Sugar number 148 was preparing to spring into action. train cleared the switch to the north end shops, the 409 uncoupled from the cars and would cut off and run back into the siding to allow the 148 to couple to the train. Once the 409 backed into the siding, the 148 emerged from the north end shops, wide awake and ready to start the day. Just like the previous day, the loyal rail fans gathered around the side of the road and watched as the 102-year-old steam locomotive prepared to couple to its cars. Before departing, the 148 would back the train towards the switch to the main track before setting off.
You see the towing pockets? This is Easter morning. And then 2 days later, they had the massive snowstorm. Why don't you, you want me to do something for dinner? So why don't you just don't worry about it. We'll get something to do. It's spoon cleaning the track. Yeah, they're cleaning the track so we get better salt. Yeah, we gotta clean up the sugar cane and the goose. Like that. We have to change the switch here? Is it going this way? Yeah, it's gotta make a Y. First you go out and then we drove around last night. Oh, they're not on the main? They're on the... I think this is the main right here in front of us. Okay.
before 9 a.m., the Sugarland Limited departed Clewiston, Florida, albeit an hour behind schedule. We will now follow this train on its first leg of the day's journey from Clewiston, Florida to Lake Harbor, Florida. At around 9:30 a.m., the Sugarland Limited crossed the bridge at Lake Harbor before preparing to stop at Miami Canal Road. Here, the passengers would disembark the train, and the 148 would perform a special photo run-by at this location. At this particular bridge, the former Florida East Coast Railway's K branch and the former Atlantic Coastline Railroad's Haines City branch connect. Once the passengers disembarked the train, the 148 began reversing at around 9:40 a.m. in preparation for its first photo run-by of the day.
Every car goes in AAPRCO posted on the page. So you look at where the car owners are. You're going to go out, we have Facebook page and website. That's good for it. I don't know. If they tell me, hey, I'm going to day cars. Well, once it didn't work out, one guy but he was like,
After the train cleared the crossing, I scrambled over to the other side with all the passengers, making sure to not get into anyone else's shot. With plenty of rolling black clouds of smoke, the vegetable oil burning 148 seemed like a coal burner for just a brief moment. After the photo run-by, the 148 backed its train over the Miami Canal Bridge and would stop at Miami Canal Road again to pick up the passengers. passengers boarded the train, the Sugarland Limited departed Lake Harbor at 10 o'clock a.m. We will now catch this train at the US 27 crossing at South Bay before meeting up with it again at Canal Point. At around 10:45, the Sugarland Limited stopped at Canal Point. Here, the 148 would cut off from the train and back into the spur track leading to Bryant Yard. This spur was once an active spot when the now abolished Bryant Turn still served Bryant Yard. The Bryant Turn was a cane train that ran from Bryant Yard to Clewiston's sugar mill. This run was abolished when U.S. Sugar began running cane jobs to Bryant Yard via a new track. As the crossing for the spur at East Main Street had been disconnected, the crossing had to be flagged so the 148 could cross. Here, the 148's crew would perform routine maintenance on the locomotive and take on water. The locomotive would stay here for about 30 minutes before taking off for its final leg of the journey to Marcy, Florida. 48 pulled out of the spur track and continued north with its train at around 11:35 a.m. We will now follow this train to Port Mayaca, Florida. Because of the speed of the train, it was hard to keep up with it. around 12:15 p.m., the Sugarland Limited approached the historic Florida East Coast Railway Port Mayaca lift bridge over the St. Lucie Canal near Highway 76. Here, the passengers would disembark the train again on the other side of the bridge for another photo run by. While it was obscured by twigs, this was a good opportunity to watch the steam locomotive crossing the rare lift bridge. Port Mayaca lift bridge is not easy to access, and when the train stopped, I attempted to walk all the way to the other side for the photo run by, but alas, it was not to be. Where's a drone when you need one? Our final stop for the day was Marcy, Florida. It is here that the former Florida East Coast Railway's K branch crosses the CSX Auburndale subdivision. Just before the diamond, which is off camera, a U.S. Sugar EMD GP11 number 308 waits on the siding for the Sugarland Limited to arrive. Once the train arrived, the 148 would cut off from the train, couple to the rear of the diesel, and the power would run around the train. For the return trip to Clewiston, Florida, the diesel power would take the lead to conserve water for the 148. After the power ran around the train, I headed back to Port Mayaca just in time to see the lift bridge lower, and the Sugarland Limited with its diesel power began to cross minutes after. Let's now follow the Sugarland Limited from Port Mayaca, Florida to Clewiston, Florida. It is now 3:45 p.m. at Davidson Rd in Clewiston, Florida, and the Sugarland Limited had stopped to let a loaded cane job led by USSC 502 and EMD GP40-2 locomotive enter the sugar mill. At last, after a long 2-day trip, the Sugarland Limited made its final stop of the weekend at the U.S. Sugar Railroad's North End shops in Clewiston, Florida. The train would spend the next 2 days here before heading back up to Sebring and down to Miami with Amtrak power. While this was by far the longest and most demanding train chase I've ever pursued, it was tons of fun and it was all worth it. I'd like to thank the folks at US Sugar, Sugar Express, and FMW Solutions, and also the owners of the private cars at AAPRCO for making this event possible. As always, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed this video. Until next time, this is Casual Rail Fan, out.